here we are in separate places doing lecture. Or you're listening to a lecture, watching a lecture, and I am giving a lecture. I've never done a lecture in my basement before, in my music room before, but here we are, and I'm going to give this a try. I'm already on my third or fourth take, but we're going to muddle through this, and maybe I'll just let all the bloopers in this time. Our topic for this week, this transition week, which we really didn't have, is one that I didn't want to miss, and it's philosophy, evil, and God. So that's going to be the one for this week. I haven't decided which one I'm going to have to take out for the following weeks. But for this week, I hope you're all safe and working hard in online courses now that you're no longer an in-face or face-to-face student. And yeah, so we'll get started. Cam, just hold on. Don't talk yet, okay? Don't say anything, Cam. All right, thank you. All right, here we are talking about philosophy, evil, and God. It's a topic that is heavily theological at some times, but mostly philosophical. Yeah, I want to say up front that this is not, this is a topic that can be really rough for some people. And so most of you know that I am a person of faith, that I was a minister at one time. I'm not coming at it from that perspective. I'm coming at these topics as a philosophy prof. And so I don't want anything that I have to say today disrupt your faith or make you uncomfortable, but I just want you to think through some things. Yeah, I don't know how long I can stand in front of the fireplace because it's kind of warm there. Maybe if I stand here, but then you can't see me. But anyway, we'll see where this goes. So where are we going today? Well, we're going to talk about the existence and non-existence of God. We're also going to talk about evil and God and some of the theories of people in the past and almost present-day theorists, philosophical theories that are floating around. It's a topic that's been around for forever. Epicurus was probably one of the first people to write about it, and I think that was around, I think I have that on here somewhere, around 200 or 300 BCE. So let's start out by talking about God. So what does the word God mean to you? When you think about God, what comes to mind? Some people might just say, God? Or some people might say, God. But when you think about God, what are the feelings, what are the pictures that enter your mind? What kind of things enter your mind when you think about God? What kind of feelings do you have when you think about God? So, when you think about God, I know I've said that many, many times now, because I want you to actually think about this. You know, what are your feelings and experiences maybe with God, or non-experiences with God? So, how does this next word change what's in your mind? or what you're thinking about God. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. There it is. Can you see that? Goddess. So, when you think about God, if you think about goddess, what do you think about? For me, it's usually something very, very different, drastically different from God going to goddess. God, when I think about God, I often think about masculinity or um, patriarchy or male pronouns or um, power that is a masculine kind of power. But when you think about goddess, what's the difference? Because goddess has a different connotation than God does, a different meaning maybe than what God does. When I think about goddess, my mind is often um, drawn to Botticelli's painting of Venus, or the birth of Venus. I wish I would have had a picture here to show it. But anyway, it's it's a beautifully feminine painting of a goddess, and that is very different from paintings of God, say like in the Sistine Chapel um, from who was it, Da Vinci, that painted the Sistine Chapel, and his idea of God, or at least the Old Testament God in the Bible, is what he painted on the ceiling. So think about that, God and goddess. Let's talk about faith. Um, what is faith? Do you have faith? Um, is faith something that's important to you? So, what does it mean to have faith? To have faith sort of means to possess faith. To have something is that you possess it. It's something that's yours. And many people would say they have faith in God. I don't know too many people that would say they have a faith in goddess or in a goddess. Although that does, in several religions, there are goddesses that are prominent in the religion, but not mostly in the West, or mostly not in the West, in Western philosophy. So, do you have faith? What is faith? What do you have faith in? Well, I already said some people have faith in God. Some people have faith in other things, or it's more like hope. But hope and faith are two different things. So, just, food for thought. Think about that. If you believe in God, though, where does this belief come from? If you believe in God, where does your belief in God come from? Is it something you grew up with? Is it something that you were attracted to, and your faith led you in a certain direction? So if you don't believe in God, so where might that belief come from? Or disbelief? Where might the disbelief in God come from? Is there is it an either or? I'm not sure about that. Is faith in God, or or non-faith in God? Does it have to be either one, or can you have both? Can you have both faith sometimes and non-faith, none or non-belief in God? Um, And sometimes you do believe in God. I'm not sure about that, but it might be a possibility. So, what is the purpose of a god or a goddess? What is the purpose of a god or a goddess? Now, there are many answers to that, uh, depending on what kind of religion you're part of or what kind of faith you have. Um, it's there are several answers. So, I mean, God might be, for some people, a construction, a human construction, to bring order to the world. Or God might be a spirit whose purpose is to make sure there is good in all the world. So yeah, think about what possibility or what are the possibilities for God's purpose in the world? Um, can the universe exist without a God? It's one of the many questions of theologians and philosophers uh, that have been asked over the years. Can the universe exist without God or a God? Of course, throughout history, with the cosmology that people that were part of people's worlds, where God was really the life giver and the sustainer of life, it was very important that God exist, or people would die, is what they would say. Uh, Today, many people would believe that the universe doesn't exist or wouldn't need a God to exist. Yeah, the universe still exists. I want to make sure you know that. Um, and as we talked about in other classes, maybe multiverses exist, but we're not going to go there today. So why or why not might you think that God God has to exist for the universe to exist? Is morality and ethics tied to the belief in God? Is morality and ethics tied to a belief in a God? So, if there wasn't a God, would people be immoral? That would be the other way of asking the question. If there's no God, would immorality just spread across the earth? Do you have to have a God for um, for morality to happen, or to be a moral person, or for humanity to be moral? So why do people believe in God? Michael Sherman wrote a book several years ago and did some research uh, and asked several questions about why people believe in God. Or actually asked one question, but got several answers. Why do people believe in God? Um, First of all, God designed and is the natural and creates the natural beauty of the universe. Um, so, good design, natural beauty of the world or the total universe. Um, Another answer, that's 29% of those surveyed said that. 21% experience, the experience of God in everyday life is why they believe in God. They experience God every day, and of course, the research doesn't say how that happened, how they experience God, or in what ways. But that's 21% of the people surveyed said they experience God in everyday life. And it's important to say, too, that this survey was done in North America. Um, and so this was a Christian survey that was done. Belief in God is comforting, 10%. And it gives meaning to life, they say. Belief in God um, gives meaning to their lives, and God is comforting. according to 10% of the people surveyed. And these, of course, are the answers. These are not ranked in any order. This is just the percentage of people that answered this as the number one reason. One, the Bible says so. 10% says the Bible says so, so they believe in God. Faith, or they need to believe in something. 8% say that people need to believe in something, so they believe in God. They have faith in God. They're raised to believe in God. That's 7%. God answers prayers, says 6%. Without God, there would be no morality. And that's, part of the question we asked earlier. They believe that without God, people just wouldn't be moral people. And again, it comes from Michael Sherman, his book called How Do We Believe? So, does God exist? What do you think? Does God exist? Again, it's a question that has been around for thousands of years. And it's a question that everybody wrestles with. Does God exist? Well, there's two arguments for theism, which is the belief in a God. And we're going to look at these. There's actually more than two, but we're just going to look at two because we don't have time to get into all of them. But there's two arguments for theism. First cause argument is the first one we'll look at. And then the argument from design, which means God is the designer. And we'll get into that more. So, first cause argument. I don't know if Thomas Aquinas was the first person to come up with this argument, but he surely developed it in a major way. And Thomas Aquinas he lived from 1225 to 1274, and so he's 800 years ago or something like that. And he says something as creator performed the original act of creation. So something as creator. And so that something then could not be part of the world. If that something created the world, that means they didn't create themselves. I mean, they couldn't have created themselves, but they created the world. Something created the world. So that whoever created the world, or whatever created the world, has to be outside the world, and that something must have been God. Therefore, God exists. So that's the argument in a nutshell. God exists because something had to create the world, and that must have been, and since it was somebody or something outside creation, then that must have been God. And therefore, God exists. And because the world exists, then God exists. I forgot that part. Yeah. Because the world exists, then God must exist because God was the creator of the world. Then the argument from design. The world and everything in it shows evidence that it is a project of intelligent design. So everything in the world shows that something intelligent designed the world, which means, if you look at the world is full of things like molecules. It's full of things like trees. It's full of things like rivers and people. And because this is so intricately aligned, and because it had to be designed by some great designer, yeah, only something as big or something um, as creative or as powerful could have done that. Um, so God exists. God is the creator. Yeah, their argument is that just like a car is designed, many different parts, many different um, intricacies in the car itself that designers and engineers had to put together or figure out. Um, that's just like God as the engineer of the world, and so God would be, or the engineer of the world, the creator, must be God. So in this argument, as we're talking about God, there's some terms that we have to know that we're going to look at. Theism, and I used that term already. Theism is somebody, or theism is the belief in a god or gods. Um, so if you're theistic, that means, or if you believe in God, you're a theist, and you, yeah, your belief in God just makes you a theist. Then there's atheism, the absence of a belief in God. We already talked about the absence of belief in God, or an active disbelief in God, and those are two different things. Um, the absence of a belief in God is just, yeah, I don't believe in God. Uh, but then the active disbelief in God almost becomes religious because uh, they are actively promoting and trying to evangelize people to not believe in God, or to convince people not to believe in God. So atheism is, is either the absence of a belief in God or an active disbelief in God. And then yeah, agnosticism, the indecision, or the the kind of an unknowing, um, whether God is real or not. Yeah, like it says here, the indecision concerning God's existence, or the view that existence and non-existence of God cannot be proven. They would, agnostics would say, for the most part, that maybe God exists, but we can't know for sure, or they just don't want to make a decision about God, so they'll say they don't believe in God, or no, they don't say they don't believe in God. They'll say that we don't know. Those two parts of that definition are rather separate, but they lead to the same thing. And then there's deism. Um, in deism, people affirm the existence of God, but deny that God was revealed, or has revealed himself as it is claimed by the monotheistic religions. And the monotheistic religions are those religions that believe that there's only one God. And that would, for the most part, the three monotheistic major religions um, would be Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. I'm sure there are other monotheistic religions too, but those are the three major religions. So they affirm the existence of God, but they deny that God is revealed, or has revealed himself as claimed by the monotheistic religions, um, either in their scriptures. But most people in the monotheistic religions believe their scriptures are the defining um, attributes of God. Evil, then, Evil. Evil is the intent to cause harm, negative moral acts or thoughts that are cruel, unjust, or selfish. Evil. How does that stack up with your own idea of evil? When you think about evil, what do you think about? Does that sort of say what it is? So then, what is the definition of God? How do we define God? Many people, many people have tried to define God over and over and over, and the definition um, it's not an easy one to put a finger on actually, uh, but there are several words that come up when people define God, and we'll look at those words. God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and I thought there was a fourth one, but no, I think I'm wrong. Um, let's look at. Wait a minute. Omnipotent. Yeah. Okay. Omnipotent. God is omnipotence means that God is perceived as all powerful, but immediately we can see that there's problems with this when we were talking about God here on earth. If God is all powerful, then that raises some questions about why God doesn't do some God things that we expect God to do. And then there's omnipotence, and as Descartes suggests, that God can do anything. Um, this omnipotence means that God not only is all powerful, but God, there's nothing that God can't do. But then when you think about that, when you push that out, can God make a square, a circle? Can God circle or a square, a circle, or can God commit suicide? Um, can God create a greater being than God? That's I mean, is that a possibility for God? If God can do anything, can God do those kinds of things? Um, if so, why can't God prevent evil? Let's hold on to that. All right. So, and then there's omniscience, which is God is all knowing. And if this is the case, if God is all knowing, why didn't God foresee the rise of Hitler and do something about it? Or the rise of Stalin, or many malevolent dictators that have killed lots of people? Why didn't God stop? Why doesn't God stop famine when people are starving? Why doesn't God just allow people all around the earth to have enough? So, when we describe God using these words, they ask questions. I mean, these words already start to raise questions for us. Omnibenevolence then means that God is all good. So, in a narrow sense, God as all good refers to God's moral character. So, the character of God is that God is good. Um, if God is the creator of all things, how could God have allowed the existence of evil then? If God is all good, how can we say that there is, or how can we can easily see the evil in the world, but how can we say that there's a God if God is all of these things, but doesn't do anything about the evil in the world? Doesn't that raise a question about whether God exists or not? Well, let's look at this problem of evil and God. It's a long, complex one. Briefly, if the cosmic designer is the theistic omnipotent and benevolent God, then why is the world so full of evil? And I think, I mean, most of us would agree that there's lots of evil in the world. Um, and evil in history. And I think, we're experiencing this COVID-19 right now, which is, I would say, an evil disease that's sweeping around the world. How can God allow this to happen? How can God let this happen? Or did God create this? Is there a reason for this? Did God create hardship and peril and evil? But that wouldn't work, because we know, if we back up here, we know that God is all good. God is a benevolent God, omnibenevolent, overseeing, the overseer of good. So Epicurus, who I mentioned earlier, 341 to 270 BCE, he writes, is God, or is he, meaning God, willing to prevent evil but not able? So is God willing to prevent evil, but he's not able to? If that's the case, that he's impotent and he can't. Is he able but not willing? Then he's malevolent, which means that he's an evil person. Is he both able and willing? But then where does evil come from? It's a predicament, a philosophical predicament that throughout history people have been working on. For most of us, the world isn't the way we want the world to be. For most of us, we would like the world to be peaceful, happy, all loving, where we all get along, where we all have enough, and there's no trouble. That's the world that we look for. Our technology tries to move us in that direction. But we know that there's lots and lots of evil in the world, and that's not the way we want it to be. Arbitrary mass destruction, disease, coronavirus, creatures torturing and killing other creatures, including humans, are killing and torturing other humans. I mean, that happens around the world in wartime or by malevolent dictatorships. There's lots of pain and illness. We all experience some of this from time to time. So why would a benevolent God let such things happen? Why would an all-good God, a God that is all good, allow these things to happen in the world? Or why would an omnipotent God create a world where such things have to happen? Why? Why would God act like this? At the beginning of Summa Theologica, Thomas Aquinas admits the existence of evil is the best argument against the existence of God. And Thomas Aquinas was a saint in the Christian tradition, yet he knows that when there's so much evil, it's hard to justify that this God is loving and caring like we want God to be, and allow these things to happen. So a tension then exists between the beliefs about evil and the characteristics of the classical theistic view of God. And there's several of these that we're going to look at. The problem of evil in God. If God exists, then God, being omniscient, omniscient, I'm going to get it. It's omniscient. Thank you. If God is omniscient, knows the existence of unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. If God exists, then God, being omnipotent, can get rid of the unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. So God already knows about the pain and the suffering in the world. And if God is omnipotent, which means he has all the power of a God, or of the God, power to change things, create the world, all kinds, power beyond belief. If God exists, then God, being omnibenevolent, would get rid of unnecessary pain and suffering around the world. If God is all loving and all caring, God would then get rid of all the suffering and destruction around the world. If God exists, then there would be no unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. So there you have it. If God exists, then, because God is all of those, the three previous, then there would be no pain and suffering in the world. However, there is unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. Therefore, God does not exist. But is that true? I don't know. Think about that. So if 1, 2, and 3 are true, if God exists, then God, being omniscient, knows the existence of unnecessary pain around the world. If God exists, then God, being omnipotent, can get rid of the unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. If God exists, then God, being omnibenevolent, would get rid of the unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. A theist, then, one who believes in God, cannot deny, then, that if God exists, there would be no suffering and unnecessary pain in the world. You can't deny that if God is all of these things. There would be no pain and suffering in the world. However, as number 5 states, there is unnecessary pain and suffering in the world. So how do we bring that together? That becomes the problem. So Gottfried Leibniz, in the 1600s, he was a mathematician and a logician. He introduced the word theodicy. Theodicy is, it means vindication of God, which means God is vindicated of all the evil in the world. He created this, he didn't create the idea, he coined the term. It's an answer to the question of why a good God permits the manifestation of evil, and thus resolving the issue of the problem of evil. Now, you have to understand, too, that this is all coming from the Christian tradition, or the monotheistic religions. And it doesn't take into account of any theology from other religions. But that's, we don't have time to, or the resources at this point to go into all the religions of the world. So we're sticking mostly with Western religion here. So the vindication of God is about pain and suffering producing good, according to theodicy. The screensaver came on. I had to turn it off. Okay. Pain and suffering then produces good for humanity. And we'll get to how that works. Very simply stated, God allows pain and suffering so that the world becomes a better place. And that definitely goes along with Western thought. Are pain and suffering necessary as a contrast to good? This is actually this is actually a different topic. I'm going to back up here a bit. Okay. So God allows pain and suffering in the world to teach us how to be good. When we experience an issue, when we experience a sickness, if we experience COVID-19, it's a suffering for us humans, and what God, according to theodicy, why this happens is so that it's a way to make people better. One way of looking at this is when you refine steel, or when you refine silver or gold or metal. When you iron, you bring that, not iron. Well, this works for iron and steel too. But when you bring the ore out of the ground, it has lots of impurities in it. So you have to melt it and separate at really high heat the impurities that are in that in the ore, in the gold that was mined, or the silver, or whatever metal you have, and you melt everything, and then you through that melting or smelting, you remove all the stuff that makes it impure, all the impurities that are in that metal. So theodicy uses that as a way to say that God is pain and suffering is like putting us through a refiner's fire, and then we get through that fire and through that pain and suffering, and it then makes us a better person, or humanity better people. All right. Other people look at this in a different way, from it may be a religious way or not. Are pain and suffering necessary to serve as a contrast to good? So does humanity know what good is if there is no evil? And that's something that comes up in my classes all the time. A lot of people would say that, well, we have to have evil in order for good, in order for us to recognize good. In order for there to be good, we have to have evil. It's kind of a yin-yang situation. So this theory suggests that we could not know or appreciate what is good without experiencing some evil. One of the problems with this theory is that there seems to be so much more evil or pain and suffering in the world than we need to contrast with the good. The amount of pain and suffering experienced by humanity is not explained. So there's this, in reality, people would say that there's very little good, and there's a lot more evil in the world than there is good. So why do we have to have that evil? So that's one of the arguments against that we don't know good if there's evil, because there's so much evil. And I'm an optimist, and I would counter that, because I think that there is a lot of good in the world. There's a lot more good than there is evil. we just like to hear about the evil, and we talk about the evil more than we talk about the good. But that's a psychological or a psychology issue. We're not going to go there today. We don't have enough time. So good versus evil. Good is a necessary counterpart to evil. This is another argument. Good is a necessary counterpart to evil. One can't exist without the other. It's like the yin and the yang. Evil doesn't exist without good, and vice versa. Um, Again, it's a pretty simple argument. It there's no reason why good can't exist without evil, except for the last argument as a contrast. So pain and suffering. We are human. Um, we're all faced with choices. As humans, we have choices all the time. We can choose this or that. We can choose this good or this better, or maybe this not so good, or maybe we can choose to be evil. So human choice, what does human choice have to do with the evil and the good in the world? And do we then, I mean, when you think about human choice, then what does that bring up? Free will. Do we have free will to choose good over evil? Or is it determinism that makes the difference? There are times when an individual's suffering comes from making poor choices. I know that I've made some poor choices and I really had to suffer. And there were years in my life where there was a point where I had no idea what I was going to do next, and where my next dollar was coming from. So but that was I felt like that was pain and suffering, but I got there on my own initiative because I made some not so good choices. So as in, okay, here's an example. This is an example I see regularly when it talks about, or when we read about choices. I got a great deal on a Sony 65-inch Android Smart TV at Best Buy. Yeah, great deal. It was normally $5,000. I got it for $3,500. But now my car died, and now I can't make it to school. Because the money that I bought the TV with, I don't have to fix my car or buy another car. So there's a choice. Somebody made a choice. They wanted a television more than they wanted the money to save up for a rainy day for when they would need it to fix their car, which might have been another hardship, but their money might have helped them out of that. We are human. Pain and suffering are very much a part of what it means to be alive in the world. We all experience pain and suffering. It's humanity. I mean, that's what it means to be human. Sometimes other humans do very evil things, and sometimes we do too. We just might not know that it's so evil. So lots of people will be recipients of that evil. When other people do evil things, usually other people, when somebody does an evil thing, usually other people are recipients of that evil. So it's just the fact that we are human. We live in a world together where people make choices. Sometimes our governments don't work towards everyone's interest. And so when we have evil within a certain country, that a government could have prevented, having that evil comes because somebody made a bad decision at a governmental level or at a top level that affected lots and lots of people. Um, oh, okay. Here's an example that I thought up when I was putting this together. We are cutting. This is somebody talking in the States. We are cutting budgets, and there really isn't any need to have researchers in the Center for Disease Control. Science isn't all that important. Um, Thus, coronavirus is skyrocketing and continuing to grow around the United States. Pain and suffering again. We are human. Pain and suffering are part of what it means to be alive in the world. There are times when we suffer through earthquakes, or through storms, or through cold, or sickness, or financial stress, and heartache. It's just part of the ecosystem of the universe that we are part of. We're just, as humans and being part of humanity, we are just part of the universe, and these things just happen. So, in conclusion, our belief or non-belief in gods or goddesses is part of our overall belief system. That belief or non-belief fits into our overall belief about how the world functions. It's not the first belief. It's not the most powerful belief for us. Our living in the 21st century, our number one belief for most people is a belief in science. Science is very much part of who we are as, or what we believe as our overarching idea of how the world works. But our belief in God or goddesses, mostly in God in this case, or non-belief, is part of that overall belief in how things work. So our belief in science, is part of our belief system. We don't necessarily have to choose between science and God, because God is a faith issue, not God is not a scientific being. God is a faith issue, and there are many other beliefs that we embrace to make up our overall belief system, and that's our system of beliefs, and that's what I just got done talking about earlier. And there we are. We are at the end. I hope you have a good week. I hope you stay healthy, and don't forget to do the discussion, the online discussion on our in econ. Don't forget to do the readings. Make sure you get those done. And we will see you in a bit.